In the Earth's most ancient and profound memories, the existence of some lives is, in itself, an ethereal poem that shatters all worldly perceptions. He possessed a counterintuitive skeleton that seemed utterly absurd throughout the entire age of dinosaurs. From the ends of his slender forelimbs extended a unique, bizarre, rod-like long bone. Even more incredibly, what supported his dream of flight was not the ornate feathers found on his kin, but a pair of dark gray skin membranes, thin as cicada wings and remarkably similar to those of a bat. This tiny creature, with a scientific name famously brief in paleontology and a size no larger than a modern pigeon, left behind no bloody traces of brutal combat in his final hours. Tonight, let us accompany the flickering hearth fire and this story, which you need not strain to remember, as we step into his true life. Ichi-Chichi, a name that in cold paleontology archives represents a Scansoriopterygiid dinosaur from the late Jurassic Yenliao biota, a creature of epoch-making evolutionary significance. But in the real night of 160 million years ago, a time filled with the painful uplift of the crust and the violent dissociation of monsoons, Chi-Chi lived as an introverted enigma, through a nearly eternal slow rhythm. This is not a noisy epic about territorial rule and cruel internal strife, but a midnight song about how to let go completely under the pressure of the era, and fall asleep peacefully, wrapped in tree hollows and pine resin. The Yenliao Great Plains of 160 million years ago were experiencing a long and irreversible seasonal transition. The air was forever filled with the slightly bitter scent of volcanic ash rising from geothermal heat. The forest was lush, dozens of meters tall ancient ginkgos and robust, needle-leafed pines covered the sky, leaving only shreds of golden light to fall wearily upon the ground. Chi-Chi stood at the top of the canopy, a place filled with the pressure of life. His tiny body, covered in fine down, appeared exceptionally small in the shadows of those giant plants, like a tiny nocturnal hermit who had wandered into a land of giants. The catalyst for the first turning point in his fate was an unprecedented inland drought that lasted for months. The lake forests he relied upon to survive withered away overnight. Extreme compression of food and living space plunged the once peaceful groups into a state of tense power maintenance overnight. Order collapsed entirely in panic. Larger early birds and jehilornis, desperate to claim the last remaining fresh fruits, began to frantically peck at each other with hard keratin beaks above the dense forest. Their dull roars echoed across the wilderness daily. Chi-Chi watched it all quietly. He saw companions who once walked side by side torn apart in fratricide, their beautiful wing membranes shattered into useless scraps under heavy blows, blood staining the withered moss. As a Ichi, a creature of moderate size without lethal weapons, he was naturally marginalized in this internal strife. The elder leader began to fix his violent, exclusionary gaze upon him. At that moment, seeing his companions become extremely violent and ugly under the drive of fear, the panic and fatigue within Chi-Chi finally tore open a profound gap. He realized that the panic and violence shown by these giants, who claimed to control the sky, when facing the exhaustion of the era, was far more suffocating than the disaster itself. He did not rise to meet the violent roars of panic, nor did he attempt to join the chaotic struggle for survival. Instead, on an evening when the heat waves slowly faded, he turned his body with extreme slowness. Stepping across the tree trunks, made slippery by volcanic ash, he moved as slowly as a pine needle silently falling through time. Without a single look back, he left the territory filled with madness, walking step by step toward the desolate, silent depths of the unknown forest. Leaving the protection of the group meant Chi-Chi had to face, alone, the top nocturnal predators hidden in the shadows of the night, those that followed the law of rapid predation, such as Enkiornis, adept at ambushing in the deep forest. In this ancient coniferous forest lacking clear visibility, any second of negligence or error in judgment, for a life the size of a pigeon, meant being ruthlessly erased from existence by the dark. Yet, within Chi-Chi's tiny, lightweight frame flowed a certainty bordering on indifference. He could not learn to prove his existence by frantically sprinting through dead leaves like those predators. He chose to carry absolute relaxation into his very marrow. He glided very slowly. Every time he glided, his body would drift in the faint currents, yielding to inertia for seconds. His belly brushed against the soft bark, making a faint, rustling sound. That posture did not resemble an escape, but rather a way of using his body to touch and sense the heartbeat of the forest. This slowness created a wondrous resonance with the surrounding night. The long glides accumulated great aching pain in his forelimb joints and pectoral fibers, and the thin, cold air from high altitude seeped through the edges of his exposed wing membranes, sending bouts of stiffening chills through his blood. He had to find a sanctuary completely isolated from the severe cold before his strength was fully consumed. But in this cold night, the wisdom of survival was never determined by the size of one's strength, but by who could be the first to find an absolute sanctuary where the soul could settle. Finally, at the moment when night had fully fallen and the wind on the plains faded, he discovered at the base of a towering, hollow ancient ginkgo tree, a secret, dry hole worn out by time. This was a natural haven inadvertently sealed by nature. The thick wooden walls blocked out the biting cold winds from the sky, while the hole, filled with inches of soft fallen leaves, emitted a captivating, faint fragrance of pine resin. Chi-Chi slowly stopped at the edge of the tree hole. He opened his clear black eyes, and the panic of the past few days finally found a harbor where he could nestle in this green stillness. In those shallow stories of later ages that obsess over portraying aerial giant brawls, the petite Chi is habitually marginalized, as if lacking the massive wingspan of a pterosaur condemns one to be a cowardly victim and the meat grinder of fate. But this arrogant interpretation fails to grasp the profound wisdom in Chi-Chi's bones, a wisdom based on absolute defense and extreme restraint. His smallness was not a weakness, but an invisible psychological wall allowing him to skillfully avoid the storms of the era. On the first night after settling in this secret hollow, danger inevitably penetrated the forest defense, arriving at the edge of this quiet haven in the coldest of manners. A primitive tree-dwelling nocturnal predatory dinosaur, several times Chi-Chi's size, its spirit exhausted from long hunting failures, tracked the faint scent of life and crept silently toward the edge of the tree hole. It was a silent game of will and life or death unfolding in absolute stillness. From the predator's maw, lined with coarse barbs, thick, corrosive, and malodorous saliva dripped onto the rocks with a faint scraping sound. The ancient cicadas fell silent in an instant, the surrounding bushes frozen in deathly stillness, the water vapor seemed to solidify into ice under the predator's greedy gaze. Yet, facing this terrifying encirclement, enough to frighten any smaller species to death, Chi-Chi displayed a near-sacred, chilling composure. He emitted no futile wail to vent fear, nor did he panic and scatter like his kin. Instead, he lowered his center of gravity, tucking his tiny body firmly into the deepest, dead corner of the tree hollow. He ceased all struggling, burying his head deep between his slender forelimbs, turning the pair of dark gray wing membranes high and tight to block his most vulnerable neck and belly. In the moments when lightning occasionally tore through the night sky, the thin skin membranes formed a natural, opaque, protective wall in the darkness. It not only isolated him from sight but radiated a chilling, near-death camouflage. The vicious predator lingered at the tree hole for a full hour, scratching large amounts of wood chips from the bark with sharp claws, yet it could never determine if the motionless black shadow within was a warm, edible life. Chi-Chi lay there quietly, maintaining a statue-like stillness. His breathing was slow enough to induce despair. In the end, before the immovable pressure of Chi-Chi, the madness in the predator's eyes was replaced by frustration, and it could only retreat back into the dark forest. After the heart-stopping standoff subsided, the midnight in the rainforest welcomed its most gentle and fatalistic moment as the clouds finally parted, revealing a massive fissure. A faint, emerald-hued glimmer of moonlight spilled silently from the canopy, illuminating the night rain falling outside, painting every shadow with a sacred silver edge. Raindrops pattered against the tall leaves, emitting dull, rhythmic sounds that gathered across the vast ancient plains into a deeply healing, hypnotic white noise. Chi-Chi completely let go of all the tension in his body. In this refuge that belonged to him alone, he began a deeply healing and immersive pre-sleep relaxation ritual. Because his body was so tiny, when facing those massive wing membranes covered in fine fuzz with rod-like bones, he possessed the most luxurious physical embrace of the entire Jurassic. He began to move, using elegant, near slow-motion movements to curl his body, clumsily yet stubbornly, into a round little ball within the soft pile of leaves. Then, slowly, inch by inch, he pulled the long, dark gray membranes behind his head, smelling of faint hay, as if pulling up an unparalleled silk quilt gifted by nature. He wrapped his entire body tightly from head to toe with the membranes. More amazingly, beneath his tiny chest, he held tight to a large nugget of ancient, warm pine resin emitting a rich caramel fragrance. At that instant, the warmth stored in the resin all day began to seep slowly, like warm spring water, through the texture of his abdomen. The heat penetrated his thick tissues, wrapped his tense nerves, and spread to every organ aching from the cold, dissolving all heavy anxiety within. Chi-Chi breathed out, the air puffed from his nostrils, turning into a faint mist in the cool night and vanishing into the depths of the sky with a lingering, rustling sound. Then, with elegant slow-motion grace, he spread his limbs, allowing every joint to yield to gravity and sink into the embrace of the mud. This warmth, fused with the low-frequency insect calls, held an irresistible hypnotic power. It was so stable that Chi-Chi no longer felt like a wandering refugee, but a bone essential to this very log and water. The night muted the ancient storms, the sound of the wind became a soothing white noise. With this safety net provided by the earth, his eyelids became heavy, and his consciousness dissipated into a gentle, void-like dream. The end of life arrived calmly and elegantly. For Chi-Chi, it was merely the most peaceful night out of countless comfortable ones. It was a typical late Jurassic rainy season, filled with the scent of withered plants and a night sky lit by thousands of gentle meteors. Chi-Chi was too old, his internal blood pump could no longer carry warm blood to his furry extremities, and every wing expansion required enduring the grinding sound of joint pain. Yet he showed no panic. On that starlit night, he returned to the hollow tree that had accompanied him for most of his life and slowly curled down in his habitual posture. He rested his weary head gently among the leaves, wrapped himself for the last time in his giant membranes, and held tight to the warm resin that had accompanied him for life. As the warm gravity of the earth took over, a collapse of the tree trunk poured warm resin and volcanic sand into the deepest hollow. There was no fear and no lament. This supreme wanderer of relaxation in the forest, within his beloved wing blanket and the comforting white noise of the rain, passed directly into eternal sleep. Over the next 160 million years, the world changed. This ancient island group underwent splits and drifts, as former bustling jungles were compressed into cold rock. Chi-Chi's frame, maintaining its perfect lying posture, was tightly encased in sand and resin, undergoing dissociation and mineralization. Every small vertebra and wing membrane trace fused with the cold rock, becoming an exquisite part of the Earth's skeleton. 160 million years acted like a traceless flood, mercilessly washing away all pride and arrogance, but leaving behind only Chi-Chi's restraint and peace, forever solidified between the ribs of the Earth. Now, this fossil specimen, hailed as the East's most sci-fi-like dinosaur, lies quietly in the center display case of a modern museum, maintaining constant temperature and humidity. Under soft mercury lights, it continues to emanate an ancient, serene aura to everyone who stops to gaze. The river that once accompanied him for countless years has long dried up, and those tall bald cypresses have turned into underground coal, yet, the breathing rhythm Chi-Chi left behind on that night seems to still faintly echo under the vast night sky of modern cities. In this modern world filled with survival anxiety, where everyone is forced to run and is pressured until they can barely breathe, this story of an ancient beast bowing his head in the tree hollow and sleeping in slow motion under his wing blanket is your most solid spiritual refuge tonight. There is no need to think about the rushing and toil of tomorrow, nor is there any need to pay heed to the secular strife that makes you feel weary and tense. The earth will, just as it accepted Chi-Chi, gently support your exhausted body with the softest gravity and the boundless night, taking away all your unease. At this very moment, your pillow is radiating the most perfect temperature, and the soft quilt provides the most reassuring physical embrace, just like the dark gray membranes and sweet resin that once gently wrapped Chi-Chi millions of years ago. Outside the window, perhaps the night wind of a modern city is blowing, and the curtains are gently rippling in the dark. These are the gentle echoes left behind in the depths of space and time by the breeze from that valley of 160 million years ago. Put down your defenses, listen to this story, and let the slow, deep inhalations lead you, slowly, to close your eyes. Good night, Chi-Chi. Good night, to every soul who has laid down its armor and returned to inner peace.